repairs paid with the $3 million that we received once the feasibility study is done. Are the homeowners that are affected in this alleyways subject to an assessment?
So per the city's policy, yes. And that was what we, as we prepared the feasibility study, we verbatim used the assessment policy that the city has in place. I do know, this may be what you're referring to, Mayor, there was some discussion back a while that possibly adjusting that because of the grant funding, and that was sort of why this was applied to this. So of course, that's your prerogative to do whatever you'd like, but this is based on the city's assessment policy.
Sure, and I read through that. Thank you very much. I just wanted the general public to understand that we have a policy and there's potential flexibility in that regard if you choose to do so based upon what the law allows us to do. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, Matt, I'm looking at page 2 of your report, page 10 of the packet, and it talks about the stormwater drainage system. And it says in here it's crowned. And I'm just curious to know, because our beautiful evaporation system of the last 50 years has disappeared, what have you done to help with how that's going to work? Because as we've noticed this spring, the water is freezing in place and then it's rutting for some reason, and our Public Works has been diligent about trying to clean up alleys. But can you talk about what that's going to look like the winter of 2025 and how that might change based on what we have now?
So it will be somewhat dependent on the existing conditions, meaning driveways, garages, homes on either side, and it will also be dependent upon the availability of of underground storm sewer on the adjacent streets and avenues. But some things that we will be looking at least I can tell you, is if there's an opportunity to regrade those alleys. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll do an inverted crown, meaning instead of the traditional push it to the outside, we push it to the middle instead and then drain it down the alleys out into the streets or the avenues. If there's not enough elevation difference or grade to be able to do that, then we'll have to look at other options like maybe putting some storm sewer in. If there's storm sewer piping out in the streets and avenues, we can get it underground and get it moving that way. So we'll look at some things. Drainage in those alley projects, typically drainage is one of the biggest challenges because when they were built, they're normally relatively flat. They're not a lot of grade. So, but we'll be looking at that pretty close to see if we can do whatever we can try to do.
I appreciate that, because I know that my alley is one of these, but all over now they're patchwork, so there is no grade even if there used to be one because of filling in with tar or whatever the most feasible was. So I appreciate that that's on your radar and you're looking out for us. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Anyone else have any questions, comments regarding the proposal that's before us today? Councilor Preedy.
Question that arises frequently to me, Matt, is how was this prioritized? I know that you and Charlie, maybe Jim and others actually took visual rides around town highlighting areas. Oftentimes it's like, why did they choose that avenue and not my avenue? And I don't really have an answer for that. I even told them we might invest $23 million into this project and it might be your pothole that gets missed. I don't know how to explain that to them. Can you add anything to that?
Yeah, it's a bit arbitrary at times, but at the same time, what we looked at was certainly condition of pavement, which you can go around town and pick any of those out, and they're all bad. You look at the infrastructure. In this instance, I believe, if I remember right, there was some steam that's been cleared and needs to be removed and remediated out of there. If I'm not mistaken, Aaron Asselson from the Public Utilities had some issues up in here with the water main that they were looking at. So we sat down collectively, Jim and myself and Charlie and Aaron, and tried to come up with, this is a pared down version of what the original one was. So we had looked at, I don't remember, it ended up being close to $25 million worth of alley work that could be done, and there were a number of different alleys. And when we said, all right, we need to, what makes the most sense? How can we get the most bang for our buck? Where are the problem areas the greatest? Things like that. It just kind of narrowed down to these three being maybe, I don't want to say maybe a little more needed than the others. So it does become somewhat arbitrary, but it's when there's so much work to do throughout the course of the town, but we try to narrow it down to if we're having problems in areas or things like that that we have to address. So I problems, things like that.
It's been thoroughly vetted and
Yes.
analyzed, essentially. Okay, thank you much.
And I guess I would say there's more to come. This isn't gonna be the end of it either, so, yeah.
Britt?
Mayor, if I may also interject, in the grant we have, we had specified we were going to use it in a low to moderate income area, which dictated what part of town we could use it in. We couldn't put it in our newer, bigger home area. It had to be in a spot that was historically low to moderate income.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Britt. Thank you, Counselor Freely. So if there's no other lights on, we're going to be looking for a motion to bring to the City Council for final approval, the approval of a resolution to receive the feasibility report and call for a public hearing.
I will make that motion, Mayor.
Counselor Johnson moves to approve, moving the resolution forward to the council meeting for final approval to set this in motion for a public hearing, call for a public hearing. Is there support? Support by Counselor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
At this public meeting, will the residents be notified that this will be affecting for assessment to attend? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Anything else for Matt on this list?
Matt needs to talk to you about the 2023 street project.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so everybody in front of you, I had placed before the meeting a colored map, and to try and, there's a lot going on in the city of Virginia right now. And so there's been a lot of discussions about when is all this work gonna take place, where are these projects located, things like that. And so Britt asked if I would put together a map and give everybody a quick update, because there has been some adjustments most recently within the last couple of weeks to the schedule in a couple of these projects and when they're going to get done based on the availability of funding. So what you've got in front of you is primarily what's going to be happening in the next, the next 3 years, 23, 4, and 5. Not necessarily all inclusive, excuse me, but this is what we know of today. So the big change that I wanted to really point out was number 3 and number 4, 10th Avenue and 13th Street. Those were programmed to start this summer. And because of some, with the funding review and property, acquisition, we're waiting on a tax forfeit piece of property to get signed over to the city. It's just taking a lot longer than we thought it was going to. And so what we've done is we've talked to the district state aid engineer, and we're gonna reprogram that and start it next year instead. So we rather than try to bid something at this time of the year, and we're probably not gonna get the greatest of bids if we try to bid it now. If we had an option of bidding it now and allowing them to do a certain portion of it this year and a certain portion of it next year, we might look at that, which I'll talk about in just a second, for a different project, but we just didn't feel that it would be in the best interest of the city right now to try to push that project and potentially get some undesirable bid numbers and then have to make a decision based on those. So 10th and 13th, number 3 and number 4 on the map, they are definitely still in the hopper, just not gonna start now until 2024. So that'll turn into a 24-25 project.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions, Counselor Freely?
I don't know if Jim would answer this, was it like, now that winter's sort of dissipating, I mean, you're seeing destruction of our streets and alleys even worse now. And like, I think some of the prioritized areas might be overtaken by some that are now being exposed. So when do we begin patching? When can we begin patching? Are we planning on patching? And have we prioritized areas for that? Because we're getting rattled all over town in our vehicles. And I'm concerned about that, as are many residents.
So Jim, if you have a moment, could you come forward and kind of,
Am I digressing from the feasibility? I don't mean to do
no,
that.
it's a good time to,
Significant concerns in town right now.
certainly.
The
I think we've
streets are-
all got those questions. I think Counselor Beyond is going to address those too at the end of the committee of the whole meeting. So Jim?
Morning. Yes, we did start patching. Unfortunately, a lot of those patches have popped out already because of what we're dealing with. And some we're running into that freeze thaw constantly, and it's been going all year long. We've had cold and wet snow in December, we've had rain in January. So you keep getting that, and it keeps popping blacktop, and this city is in rough shape. I mean, there's patches on top of patches. In fact, one of the public just stopped in here now. He's having issues in his alley where we've been down there with equipment, and that equipment doesn't help even going down those alleys because that equipment's heavy. And as that stuff's breaking up, it's only getting worse. So, and there's thin patches. I mean, some of these blacktop alleys and that have 2 inches of blacktop on them. So that's why I feel the need that, we got to start working on this infrastructure. And
So the plan, if I'm ahead, I think to Councilor Freelieb's question is, when are we going to, do you have a schedule as to once the freeze and thaw stops to fill all these potholes with the hot mix?
yeah, we'll definitely have our pothole patcher out also, but what I'd also like to see is some actual replacement of some stretches. I know Third Avenue and Chestnut, there's 100 potholes in that stretch. Let's cut that out of there, square it up, and put a nice patch in there, something that's gonna hold up. And that's something we gotta do throughout this city. We can't just continue to patch the same potholes and they keep blowing out bigger.
And you have a potential plan to do that around the city over this summer, portions of it, and
Yes.
thank you. Councilor Philippe? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Matt?
I guess I'll just real quick mention something else and then I'll wrap up unless anybody has any questions for me. But I'll point out that, so everyone's probably, what's going on this summer, right? What is now going to happen this summer? So Third Avenue, which was completed last year, has one more lift of blacktop to put down and a little bit more grass to grow. So we'll finish that up this year. Southern Drive, same situation. And then Silver Lake Trail, that's the dashed one along the south side of Silver Lake. We're calling it Phase 2A. That was programmed to get done last year or this year, depending on when the contractor wanted to start it. So they're going to work on that. And then as we start moving ahead, we're going to be looking at a couple more segments of the Silver Lake Trail. And we're still hopeful that we can do the segment of 6th Avenue and 17th Street that we were talking about doing. That one is in a similar situation to 10th and 13th. However, because of the way that project is structured, it's possible we might still be able to bid that one this year and allow them to maybe just do one of the streets this year and do one next year. We're just gonna have to wait and see how things play out. But there is a possibility, I'd say it's 50-50 right now. And every day it's probably getting more weighed to the pushing it off, but it's probably 50-50 that we could still get 6th and 17th bid this year and going. So we'll have to pull the trigger on that here in the next 3 to 4 weeks at the latest is when we're gonna wanna decide what we're gonna do. So hopefully we can. 2024, if it goes as things are planned right now, 2024 next year is going to be a very busy construction season in the city of Virginia. So, which again, it's gonna be a little bit of an inconvenience for a little bit of time, but when it's all done, it'll be good. So I'm gonna stop. If you guys have any questions or want me to discuss anything more, I can.
I just have one question, Matt, if I may. So once these decisions are made, based upon funding, and based upon the way the bid it out, so we have a map. This is very helpful. Thank you, Britt, and thank you, Matt, for putting this together. What a final list of for sure projects that we are going to be doing starting in 2023. We have those. Are these in stone? This is in stone
So
for the most part.
Silver Lake Trail, Third Avenue, the green ones on this map
Yep,
are most definite.
okay,
The purple ones, segments 15 and 16, the dashed ones,
right,
those are, I would say 90% for sure. 5 and 6 are, that's what I was discussing earlier.
Right.
Kind of 50/50. So everything else on here is out to either 2024 or later. Now, oh, and I should mention, there's some that don't show up on the map just because you'll see listed, down in the legend, it says not shown on map, the SCADA upgrades. If you remember, we're doing some work on all the lift stations and the telemetry. That's starting up. That really won't have an impact on anybody. You won't even really know that's going on. And then also, we got a grant that Britt's just finalizing right now with the MPCA within the next week or two, to where we're gonna start looking at infiltration and inflow. So that's what's that I&I evaluation is. And so what we're gonna start doing is doing some flow monitoring within the sanitary sewer system. And that'll try to help us identify the areas of town. We know that there's infiltration and inflow in the sanitary sewer system all across town. We know that. But as we're trying to figure out how to prioritize the areas, again, the most bang for your buck, kind of back to what you were asking earlier, Counselor Friedley, about how do we prioritize these things? We're gonna get some flow monitoring equipment in strategic locations and try to determine where the worst areas are, so then we'll obviously start there. So, and that's important for your wastewater treatment plant. It helps drop the costs of your sewage treatment, things like that. Your capacity of your wastewater treatment plant. So there's other things going on, I guess, that aren't really gonna be noticed by the public per se, but the ones on here that I mentioned earlier are the ones that are gonna have a lot of public impact.
thank you. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I was just going to ask you to explain what what all that meant. And basically, there's two different sewer systems. One is for the icky stuff and one is for the rainwater. And when the rainwater goes in the icky stuff, it costs us more.
There you go.
And so if we keep them separate, it'll save us money long-term on both the treatment and on the equipment. So
Yeah, and it's kind of a catch-22 because, dilution is the solution to pollution, right? So you put clean water into dirty water and it kind of dilutes it. But in the big scheme of things, it doesn't save you a lot of money because it might save you on a month by month, a little bit on your treatment, but at the same time, again, it's not really treating it per se. And long-term, it's harder on your wastewater treatment facility. The more wear and tear you have on that, that's the expensive part, when you have to do work on that.
So like all the snow and salt that's melting now, some of it's going into the sewer, and that salt is eating away at our equipment and stuff like that.
Certainly does, yep.
Okay, perfect. So, and the other thing I wanted to bring up and remind people is that the trail parts are grants we received that can only be used for trails. So we're not choosing to skip a street to do the trail. The trail is its own bucket of money and its own priority and its own funding source. So I want to just make sure that's clear too, that we're not favoring the walkers and bikers over drivers. It's a totally different thing and they're mutually helpful to each other.
Yes, and actually, to that point, every single one of these colored pieces of construction on this map have some sort of outside grant funding associated with them. So I don't know what that total is, but it's millions of dollars. It's several millions of dollars worth of money that's coming from outside sources into these projects, trails and streets, so.
Oh, so just one more thing, Matt, could you please repeat that engineering term regarding pollution?
Dilution is the solution to pollution.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it very much. Anybody else have any other questions for Matt Reed, our engineer of record from SCH? Nope. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it very much.
Yep.
Yep. Item number 2 is the capital equipment purchase request that we had put together with staff. We have been talking since the last budget cycle last year that we want to do a bond, a capital equipment bond this year. And so I have created the list by obtaining information from all staff. I do have to point out there is one mistake. The Toro Field Pro 6040 under Park and Recreation is not 330,000, it's 33,000.
That's a relief.
That's a heck of an increase, yeah, a heck of a.
That was a relief.
Mistake there. Yeah,
All
sorry
right,
about
thank
that.
you. All right.
And we do have 2 department heads, 3 departments heads here to discuss their request if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. And as we look at this capital equipment purchase. I got calls from, and stopped by some city employees saying some of this equipment is woefully inadequate, end of life, difficult to operate, dangerous to the community, dangerous to the workers, and they just need upgrades on these equipment in order to continue to move forward for the future. We have not in the past had a really significant vehicle or equipment replacement schedule. Part of that is because of the cost associated with our budget and how to budget for those things. And we will be trying to make adjustments and decisions based upon how can they have the minimum impact on the taxpayer with respect to our levy. We have had equipment bonds before. They have been successful in spreading this out over the long term and providing for the needs of the department heads with respect to equipment. So you have before you this list. And it was vetted and discussed and recommended by staff and put together that these are the needs, not the wants, of the department heads who are requesting the equipment. And this bond is something to consider moving forward in trying to provide the equipment necessary and for the services to our community and have it paid off over the long term on this bond. So thank you.
Mayor, if I may make one note.
Yes, please do.
The fire request for the rescue truck, if we were to purchase it, if we were to agree to purchase it today, which we're not ready to do that quite yet, but if we were to, it would not be here for 18 to 24 months, which is why it was not included in the 23 list, because the 23 list needs to be things that are coming in 23,
Yes.
not things that'll be here in 24, 25.
And thank you for that clarification, Britt. Yeah, that's a 2-year project. Councilor Beyondich.
So with this bond, the total for the equipment for 2023 would be 2 million?
A little bit over that, yes.
2,400,000, yeah.
We had already approved preliminarily 3 million, but when taking the rescue truck out, because we can't include that in this bond, brings us down to about 2 million.
Okay, and then we're looking at another bond for the public safety building.
Completely different, 2 different bonds, because there's many different types of bonds. Like, we're doing bonds for the street projects, those are called street improvement bonds or utility bonds, and also special assessment bonds, 3 different types of bonds for the street projects. For the building, we're going to be doing a capital bond, or charter bond is what it's called. And that is something different than this. This is a capital equipment purchase.
So do we have any outstanding right now, or is this going to be,
We have many, many bonds outstanding.
so we're adding to our bonds?
Correct. Last year was our last payment for our last capital equipment bond. So it's cyclic. We paid off that one, and it's time now to do another. And Sherry's raising her hand over there. Sorry, Sherry. I do see you raising your hand.
Sherry?
Council, yeah, we, actually in February here, we dropped off 2 bonds. One was the capital equipment, like she said, in 2012. And then there was another one, I think it was 2008 bond. So when we did it at the time with the interest with George Eilertson, he did a preliminary, what it would cost. It was actually going to be under what our payments were with those 2 bonds. So even though we have lots of debt, we're still chewing away at it.
And then, so is there ever any hope of us being able to set aside for equipment needs and not have to bond?
Are there other ways in which to do so? One of them is to get a list, start the purchase process of that through the proper channels, and then apply that to our levy and raise the taxes for the businesses and the city and the residents to pay for these in the short term as opposed to the long term.
So either way, the taxpayers are paying for a long-term bond.
Yes.
So
But if I can.
Yeah,
explain it
please,
to me.
Sherry.
So last year, when we were doing 2023, it would have, the levy, and this is going to be scary, was going to be around 18% for this equipment. Spread over 10 years is a lot easier than one chunk of 18%. So it's a small fraction versus hitting the public with 18%. I mean, we can do that, but the problem with this is next year you're going to have, you've seen the outlay. So that would be quite a chunk of change to keep raising the levy that much.
For the public safety building, that bond, that is spread out for 40 years. Do we have, and I know I'm kind of veering off subject here, what is the total cost of that public safety?
I believe we're at 31 million.
31, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. Are we, we're just reviewing it this time, not taking any action with respect to it, are we?
Correct. This bond will be sold at the same time we do our street bonds, which is anticipated to be in, we're going out for bid in April here, Matt?
Matt?
Sorry, Matt,
Once
did we bring it back
again,
up? We're talking about when we go out for bid in April, with bids awarding in May, is our plan?
For the 6th and 17th project? Yeah, hopefully.
Correct,
I would say probably push that out a few weeks, but hopefully.
correct. And so then the bond sale would be immediately after, 30 days after we award the bid. So it'd be in June would be the bond sale. So we would do the bond sale for the equipment at the same time.
and the scheduling for the approval to move for this capital bond, the equipment bond is when?
Before we sell the bonds in June.
Yeah, so we have time.
A little bit of time, yeah.
A
A
little
month.
bit, little bit of time. So you'll be looking for us to approve some sort of equipment bond within the next month.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Counselor Johnson?
Mayor, I want to thank the staff for working on this. I know we've had this 10-year, or not 10-year equipment outlay since I've been on the council, 6 years. And that the staff have come to them with our needs. Part of the challenge we continue to face is what we call deferred maintenance. We put off, our team of mechanics have made these things last years and years beyond their useful life, and they're still making them work. The citizens of Virginia have to pay for it. We are paying for it, whether it's through our regular taxes or whether it's through a special levy or a bond, or everything that goes through this council or through the city is taxpayer funded. That's how government works. And so that we've come up with a list of only $2.3 million for this, I think, is actually pretty astounding with all the stuff we do need, including all the streets and the rusting out trucks that Public Works and Parks and Rec are using. I mean, that's all what our staff has done to stretch the money out as far as it possibly can go, without creating too much of a problem. But because of that, the problem gets bigger in the future. So I appreciate that we're trying to get ahead of it, and there's a plan as we move forward, all of which people can request at any time, and they can see it, and the staff are more than qualified to explain why we're doing what we're doing. And it ultimately comes down to the council to approve or deny these things. So I think we're headed on the right track, and I think that we're, again, digging out of a hole because of other financial constraints in the past that nobody had control over. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. So any other questions, comments, or concerns with respect to this particular item? We're reviewing the capital equipment purchase for 2023. We'll be being asked in the next month or so to make a decision on whether to approve this for going out for bond sale. Seeing no other comments, Britt, next item.
Thank you. The third item is the cash rate for monthly fitness club memberships at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center.
Okay, Brian Silber, our Park and Rec Director. Brian, could you just give us a quick overview of this?
Yes. Here the other week, we were instructed to start accepting one-time cash payments for monthly memberships for the fitness center. Previously, this council had approved our fitness membership as being a reoccurring monthly fitness membership rate that was paid via a credit card. Purpose of doing that is to target customers such as myself that purchased the membership back in when the fitness center opened and have used it probably about 4 to 5 times. So we are capitalizing on my family's $50 per month and lack of usage. We do have many members that have purchased the fitness membership and use it on a very regular basis. But the reoccurring monthly payment is to guarantee that revenue stream. About 2 weeks ago, we were instructed to start a cash payment, which is a one-time payment for a 30-day membership. We've implemented that. However, we have seen that there are some additional staff time that has to be put into that one membership versus the other membership. So my recommendation is if we are going to continue doing that cash membership for a 30-day membership, that it has a separate price, a little higher price than a reoccurring membership fee does.
Yeah, I have one question before everybody's going. One question. So those who have a recurring membership, as I do, and have used it very little because I have a gym at home, but I still use it from time to time. When it's a recurring theme, there's a administrative fee that goes along to that, and when they're charging it by credit card, that fee is attached for $25, ends up to be X amount of dollars per month. So by doing this cash payment, does that negate the recurring fee, and that's the reason you're asking for the higher cost for that, and because you anticipate more staff time in order to accomplish this change in policy?
Couple of the fees that are included with it. A individual membership, such as the one that you have per month, is $25 a month, plus tax. And then, since yours is reoccurring, there's a credit card convenience fee of 3%.
Right.
So I believe your $25 membership ends up being something like $28 and change per month.
Right.
A cash membership, because we have sold one, ends up being $26.09. Now, part of the challenges that we have encountered with doing the cash membership is pennies, nickels, and dimes. Whereas that's not a big deal. In our concession stand, everything is set to round to the quarter. So in our safe and in our money bags, we have tens, fives, ones, and quarters. Well, now with doing a cash membership, we're going to need to have pennies, nickels, and dimes. The additional staff time is going to come because we had a very bad practice last Friday when we sold this membership. We went to the safe and opened the safe to get the money out. I believe, and I believe Sherry would say, that opening the safe in front of our customers is probably a financial no-no, that we should have that money out and in a drawer ahead of time, which means every morning when we get that money out and get that drawer going, somebody's going to have to count the money. At the end of the day, we're going to have to reconcile that drawer and put it away, and hopefully bring money over here to City Hall for the deposit for the day. We will also need to add pennies, nickels, and dimes to that cash drawer, which is not a big deal. But seeing these additional staff times, in addition to that, when you purchased your membership, one of the things that we did was we looked at your credit card and looked at the expiration date. And then your access card that you were given, its expiration date coincided with your credit card's expiration date. Therefore, when your credit card that we have on file that's getting billed monthly is set to expire, your card will deactivate, prompting you to come into the office and go, my card's not working, and we can look and go, oh, because your credit card is set to expire, and we can update your information and keep capturing that monthly revenue on a regular basis. For the cash member, now when we sell that membership, we have to set their card to expire within 30 days. Somebody has to then verify that, yes, it has expired. If they come back in from 30 days from their initial date of purchase, then we have to reactivate their card for another extended period of time. or at the end of their membership, we have to archive them in the system so that our system isn't getting full of inactive cards that we are looking, so that when we do a review of all the cards to make sure that things are running smoothly, that we don't have tons and tons of inactive cards showing up in our list.
So when you're asking for a monthly fee, I guess I'm looking for the benefit of that. A, how many people are participating in the cash flow? And then when you indicated that they pay by credit card, so if they pay by credit card from month to month as opposed to recurring, what is the reason for they're given for paying cash on a month? Is it because they don't have a credit card, or is it because they do have a credit card but they're just doing it temporarily, or what are the reasons for that?
Since we've opened the fitness center, I know of 2 individuals that have talked to me that wanted us to have a cash option. One does not have a credit card. The other does not believe in giving his credit card out.
Okay.
This also could be a potential benefit in capturing student memberships for college students that are home over the Christmas holidays. But we implemented a policy for them this past Christmas where they purchased their membership, and then we immediately handed them the cancellation form, and they canceled their membership, so it was only good for 30 days. So we were able to capture those college students over the holiday period.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Beyondich.
you. So how many cash memberships are you handling right now?
We have 1 right now,
Okay.
but it's only been in place for the past week.
This individual did reach out to me. They do not have a credit card. They do not know if they can continue this membership month to month. And I just find it unfortunate that we exclude people that don't have disposable income to use that facility. This individual has talked to me, which I in turn reached out to Brett to consider this a cash option. I don't see that you have 10, 20, 50 people paying cash. This is an individual that wants to use our facility. Sorry. Yeah, and be able to pay cash. And like I said, they don't know month to month if they can continue the membership. So for one individual, I don't think it's a lot of extra work to go out of our way to help somebody that would like to use that facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I can appreciate the accessibility, but the reason there's only one person right now is because one person reached out to a counselor and it was decided that it would be acceptable. But you said you've had 3 others, so there's 3 people potentially that could be using it. And once word gets out that there's a cash option, it could grow substantially. My question is, are they paying for the month they're paying for, or are they paying for 30 days? And I'm gonna ramble a little bit to make a point before I ask you a question you actually need to answer. Fair enough?
Fair enough. All of our memberships are 30-day memberships. So if you purchase it today on April 3rd, 4th, it will expire on May 3rd, would be the last day you could use it.
Thank you. So I appreciate that, because theoretically, we could be having a person a day with monthly payments, which indicates a lot of staff time as we move forward. Is there a reason why, and I'm just trying to throw out some ideas, instead of it being monthly, it has to be quarterly? Because then it's a little less time and it's a little bit more of a commitment. Can we be invoicing people? We have the rec desk where we send out invoices and there's other stuff. I just think that I'm a little frustrated that one person is getting their way when we've had a policy established for a year. That kind of bothers me a little bit. Because if a policy needs to be changed, then we need to change the policy for everybody all at once and advertise accordingly. There's very little a person can do in life right now without some kind of electronic payment. Very little. People who don't want to get credit cards can buy Visa gift cards, and those work just the same way. And you can renew money on those. I think that I would like to see us come up with a legitimate policy if we're going to accept cash and what it means. Because I was there for a day a week ago, 2 weeks ago Friday? 2 weeks ago Friday. And the amount of stuff that happens in that office is staggering, with interruptions and having individuals come in to pay cash and what that process looks like. Do we accept cash for rentals or anything else, Brian?
For building rentals?
Building rentals or space rental?
I guess we would accept cash, but most people use a check or a credit card. I can only think of a handful of times that we've received cash for like a Lions Club rental.
I personally, I'd like to see this looked at a little closer and make sure we're being consistent. And I also question if one or two people versus the 100, 200 that are already signed up for, is it worth the time? But that's my personal challenge. So that's all I have for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. So you're already accepting the cash option now, right?
We did implement that here the other week.
From my perspective, whatever staff determines to be appropriate to do, I don't have a problem doing it. That's your job to figure out, how you're going to make that adjustment, how you're going to, handle the money, how you're going to all those. So that's all up to you to get that done. One of the concern is that if it takes a little bit more staff time, I guess adjustments will have to be made, but I don't anticipate it's necessary to hire somebody specifically to do that. So
No, I'm not suggesting that we hire anybody else specifically for this role.
right, and then I just made that statement in the form that, you continue to operate with your existing workforce. So my determination is I know we're just discussing this now. Maybe I agree with Councilor Johnson to establish some kind of a policy for cash payment or add it in some fashion to what your policy or what your process or procedures are now. But it's your decision to make as how you want to get it done. As long as it gets done and you accommodate anybody who wants to go, that's fine with me. So coming here today to ask us, so are you asking us to continue to allow you to do this, or you're just giving us information?
I would recommend that if we are going to continue to do this, that we adjust the cash option payment rate.
Okay, so you're asking for an increase in what you've currently charged for cash option. You're asking us as the elected body to approve or give you the authority to increase it to whatever you determine you needed to be done in order to receive cash.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson?
I'll make a motion to direct staff to create the cash policy and bring forth suggested rates that match that policy.
Okay, thank you. Is there support?
Support if that's what you're looking to have happen.
By Councilor Freely. Once again, Councilor Freely?
I support.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, supported by Councilor Freely. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank
No.
you, Brian. I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, apologize. Roll call, please.
Baranzelli? Yes. Huffy?
Aye.
Motley is absent. Friedlieb?
Aye.
Olson is absent. Beyondich?
No.
Johnson?
Yes.
So we're not spending money, we're just, so we can, that's so the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is review the recommendation from the Personnel Committee for the airport assistant.
Okay, I would refer to a member of the Personnel Committee, which would be Counselor Freely. And give us a little synopsis of that meeting that you held and recommendation moving forward. And I know that this is relating to the airport assistant and some compensation there. And I know that Counselor Johnson is the current president of the board for the airport authority. So I look for comments in that regard. Counselor Freely.
Sure. Chris Marfiotti did a really nice job of providing us with information in respect to all of the additional duties that she's had to assume in the role that she holds at this point in time as the airport assistant, but I think it's now the airport manager. And so after listening to that and seeing the information that was provided to us, I thought it was justifiable and legitimate to consider her request for an increase in pay for the duties and responsibilities she has.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
And I'll echo that. And what she's asking for is that the money that is paid to, the city pays, or the city pays to the airport, or the other way around, Britt?
Both cities put in the stipend to the airport, and then we bill them, the airport authority, for the portion of Chris's wage. That is,
And this is the difference between what we currently pay and what what they pay in. So we're just creating a net zero for her, and it gives her an increase and she really is amazing at what she does. And the airport, for the first time in a long time, is not going backwards. It's moving forward. Our fuel sales are great, and it's all because of the management and the tracking that both Chris and the other folks that are out there, the other person out there is doing. So I would move that we accept the pay increase.
Okay, moved by Counselor Johnson to make the fee increase or the salary increase adjustment to the stipend for the airport duties and responsibilities of Chris Marfiotti. Is there support? Support by Counselor Freely. Further discussion? First of all, Counselor Beyondich, and then I have a question.
Thank you. And after reading the minutes from our meeting, so what I need clarified is the current stipend. Is this a stipend or is this an overall wage increase?
it is a wage, it's a stipend added onto her base wage.
So how many hours are dedicated to the airport and how many are for the city of Virginia?
To 30 hours per month.
So is this considered a stipend as it's typed in here?
Is added to her base wage.
So it's for her Virginia work and the airport work?
According to the MOU that it's what we had negotiated, the MOU we negotiated back in 2019, I believe. It's part of her base wage.
And I didn't catch it until I started going through the minutes from our meeting, that I think we should have some clarity on the hours worked for the city of Virginia and the actual hours worked for the airport authority.
She does that, she has that information, she keeps a log of what she does.
So
The way the memorandum of understanding was negotiated in 2019 was that her base wage was increased to include that dollar amount.
So we should take out of here a stipend. I mean, that's how I'm reading it. If it's a stipend, it's a separate, the stipend is for the work for the airport authority.
Right.
And that's what the city is reimbursed for, correct?
Correct.
So now that it's an overall wage increase for the city of Virginia and for the airport authority, does the money from Evlith cover that entire increase of all hours? Thank you.
Yep, they get billed, so we're just getting that money back because Chris is performing the duties and responsibilities, so she should be entitled to the stipend as recommended, or the wage adjustment, or whatever, how we want to word that, as requested. So if we have to make a language change, we can, but the MOU, the member of understanding, I think it clarifies and makes it fairly clear that that we're gonna, she's gonna get this adjustment based upon the hours that she works. So if wording has to be changed, as long as the bargaining unit is fine with the wording, and we understand that that's the case, and it has been an ongoing recommendation, and she's been carrying this wage. But now we're asking for the additional money that she gets, that Evelyn gives to us for the work that she does. And that's part of the MOU.
So Evelyn understands that it's for her overall wage and not just for the airport.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and I would like to see this language in here cleaned up, and just to make sure that the monies coming in from Evelyn cover the entire wage
Airport
increase.
Authority. Yep. Not from the city of Evelyn, from the Airport Authority. pays
Airport
for that.
Authority.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm not saying she's not doing a good job. That's not, it's the language that this is written in that I question. Thank you.
Okay, hang on one second. Okay, thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Because this, are you referring to the MOU?
No, I'm referring to the minutes from our last meeting, where it's a stipend.
Okay,
So
and
that's what I was just trying to clarify.
certainly, thank you. And what does it say in the MOU? We have people from the Austin Bargaining Unit. It is a part of the MOU that we have established recently, so looking for your input and clarification.
I don't have that.
The MOU, we can give a copy. It's was signed in 2020, and it references stipend nowhere. So that's why I was confused. I just want to make sure that there's
Right,
not
the
a
MOU
language.
doesn't say that, but I think we reflected it in the minutes as a stipend, which is really not. It's actually part of the MOU as a wage adjustment, right? Correct, so thank you. So hopefully that gives us some clarification there, Counselor Beyondich.
Thank you. And that was my confusion, is in our minutes, it has it as a stipend.
Sure, certainly.
That's the motion that was stated,
Right, and stipend, it wasn't the proper
right?
form. It's to make the adjustment to her wage as outlined in the memorandum of understanding with the ASME local. Is that correct? So that would be the motion that would come to the floor. Is there a motion on the floor? Okay, thank you. Okay, there is a motion on the floor in support for that, to make that wage adjustment based upon the language that's in the MOU of the, we have that was established in 2020. So there's a motion on the floor in support. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 5 is a request we received from the class of 2003. You can tell what year I think it is. Approve the request to close the 100 block of Chestnut Street for Saturday, June 17th, 2023, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the 20-year class reunion for the VHS class of 2003.
Counselor Beyondich moves to approve. Is there support? By Counselor Friedlieb, is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
Items 6 and 7 come to us from our library director, Jody. Number 1 is to approve the request to close the library on Tuesday, May 9th, 2023 at 5 p.m. so that staff can attend the annual dinner, I think, for the Friends of the Library. Is that correct, Jody? Annual meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, looking for a motion
So moved.
moved by Counselor Beyondich. Is there support? By Counselor Friedlieb to close the library on Tuesday, May 9th at 5 p.m. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 7 is approve the request to close the library on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023 to prepare for the summer reading program.
Moved to approve by Counselor Johnson and supported by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, Counselor Johnson.
I would just have a request that if it could be, if the annual meeting could not be on the second Tuesday of May in the future, it could be any other day, but it's a council meeting night, and that automatically precludes any of us from showing up on time.
Yeah, it's the Friends' actual meeting time, so they just, that's when they meet, and so that's why it is when it is, so we had no.
Then with all due respect, I don't want to hear any complaints about none of us showing up.
Exactly, I will pass that on. We meet
Thank
next
you
week,
very much.
so.
Well, we were able to attend last year because it was an off Tuesday.
Yeah, it was an off Tuesday, just, I don't remember, I think it was just because of when the venue was available and everything else, and so,
Okay,
okay. I will pass that along, though.
Thank you, Jody. For those who are listening at home, Jody Grebanowski, our library director. Thank you. Okay, do we vote on that? Okay, next item. If I may, if we could take a little bit of a break. Brian Lindsay, who is on his way, would like to discuss the items that are on the other items of concern moving forward. But before we take a break, I think maybe, Maya, did you have something that you wanted to address under other items of concern? We might as well do that now.
Sure, I have to
Thank you.
find it. This was a letter, and it actually was addressed to the mayor and the council, and I just got it last night, so I didn't have time to do anything with it. So I will just read it off my phone. To the mayor and city council of Virginia, I am writing out of frustration with the continuing decline over several years of plowing the alleys. Many years ago, it was done so well, as a two-plow tandem in unison with the avenue plows as they passed by. The alley plow would take what those plows left. That changed several years ago. It became a one-car width, so I had to take more snow from the alley itself with my scoop and put it in my yard to get my vehicle out of the garage. Now that the steam has been shut off on November 1st, 2021, there needs to be even more plowing done to keep up with the snow. My complaint on this very snowy year is that there have been many days when the alley was very slushy and that could have been removed. It has only once that the crew came and removed excess snow. As a taxpayer and longtime resident, I think you should focus on street and infrastructure rather than walkways by the lakes and other things not necessary at this time. And I think, as you alluded earlier in the meeting, that a lot of people have reached out in frustration of the alley street conditions. Alleys, especially trying to get in and out of garages, has been frustrating for the public. So I was given this to read, and I just wanted to make sure that it got out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Beyondich. So one quick question before we take a break. We'll wait for Brian to come. I'd have a question for Brian Silber. Brian, if you have any information, I know this was discussed way back in the when our new Iron Terminals Event Center was being constructed, and I remember sitting in at that design team meeting and talking about some of the issues with respect to pedestrian crossings that are there, and there is some consideration as to looking for where the pedestrians are they actually coming from the parking lots. And so I received a number of calls during the Homeboat and Travel Show, visiting while I was sitting at the food shelf booth about you're having to walk from the parking lot on the road to get to the main entrance. They were going across the parking lot would be on the west side, walking over the snowbank to go walk across the street to get to the sidewalk, the main part of it. Do we have any plans for looking at some pedestrian cutouts in that regard? Or are you aware of that, of any of that, Brian? I know I'm asking you, and we should be asking Matt Reed and DSGW and others about that, but have you experienced or seen or heard from any people from the general public regarding this?
Yes, we have heard. Foot traffic is a unique thing, and pedestrians sometimes, and you look at a lot of park design, and you will end up putting paths where people walk anyway, because that is the quickest route. From the west parking lot, we have seen a lot of people that are cutting across the island that is there in between cars, just because it saves a few steps. During the construction of the building, we had discussed that, this is a possibility, and we had looked at eventually maybe making a curb cut there, eliminating a parking spot to make it more of a pass-through. We looked at this again last summer. I don't remember all of the details why, but I think it got shut down due to ADA access.
Correct, there's not a Where you wanted to put it is not ADA compliant.
Okay. So, and where we were wanting to put it was the area that the people are naturally going to or seem to be migrating to, and that is not, it would not be ADA compliant, which is why we did not go to the expense of doing a saw cut for something that would not be to code or legal.
Yeah, thank you for that. And what I'd like to do maybe is have staff take a look at how we could be ADA compliant and provide additional pedestrian crossways in order to accomplish that, whether maybe it's just a matter of convenience for some of the people, but I just wanted to have us take a look at it and address it. Even I know you've discussed it before, but maybe take another look at it if possible. Appreciate that very much. Councilor Johnson?
I have another item. Recently, I got a letter from the Public Utilities about water, and I've gotten a lot of questions I can't answer. I was wondering if the Public Utilities could send us some more details about what the plan is. The biggest concern I've heard is, so they're going to know what my water is, and then they're going to make me change it, and I can't afford it. So if there's some additional information that could be provided from PUC, so we can answer questions, that would be great.
Did have a Facebook post yesterday that said, please call them. They'll explain it to you and what they're looking for. So they really encourage people to call the utilities, and everybody, the staff members know what they're talking about when you call about this letter. So
I think,
give them a call.
sorry.
And I'll get the information for the council too.
I guess that's what I would like, because people, we're going to say, call them, and they're going to say, I did, and I was on hold for 20 hours, something like that. So I'd like to have a better understanding so I can help maybe alleviate some of the stress about it. Thank you.
And thank you. And then for the general public's edification, I think many of you in your utility bills or outside had a separate letter asking for photos to be sent to the Department of Public Utilities. They're trying to establish an inventory of what type of access to water comes into your home or your business, and take some photographs. They're trying to establish some kind of an inventory to determine the conditions of the water lines coming into the various structures within Virginia. I also received a letter. I took photographs, and I got a response back from Aaron Axelson, the outside worker or manager for the Department of Public Utilities, thanking me for sending the letter, and they're establishing the inventory. But to Councilor Johnson's request, maybe if we could get some more information, and maybe we could refer to anyone to call the utilities, or to, there's a number that you can call that's on that letter to help accomplish that. So there's just, the only reason that I was given was that they're trying to establish an inventory as to how your water accesses your buildings. So, thank you. Okay. And one other thing, I've asked Brian Lindsay, and I gave a note to our acting city attorney to ask for a clean copy of the Iron Trail Motors agreement as quickly as we can, to make sure those are the addendum changes that we approved and agreed to are in writing and on file here, and with each councilor having a copy of it. So thank you for that. Okay, let's take a few minutes break here, and we'll hopefully, if you can maybe get a hold of Brian, see when he's available, if he's on his way or not. Thank you. Let's take 5 minutes.
It does, Brian.
Okay, let's get started again. Wait till for Counselor Johnson to get back, and then we'll start moving forward. And then when Brian Lindsay comes, he'll be able to clarify some questions that we might have or give us some guidance and direction as we move forward for item 8 through 11. Let's start with item number 8. I'll wait for Counselor Johnson to get back. Okay, let's get started with the next item on the agenda under other items of concern. And when Mr. Lindsay gets here, we'll probably have some questions, or he'll give us some additional information. Britt?
Thank you. Item number 8 is the review the updated rental code and fee schedule.
Okay, thank you. So we have separate issues here, the rental code ordinance itself, and then separately the fee schedule, correct? Okay, thank you. Let's talk about first the review of the updated rental code. If anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about the rental code, and I think the goal and objective here is potentially to move this to the council meeting for approval.
We had the first reading last time.
We had the first reading, okay, then so the next reading will be next Tuesday, correct? All right, thank you. So just to review the updated rental code and fee schedule, some of the landlords are aware of this, but they're not here today, so they'd be taking a look at this. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. Are the interested parties notified of this meeting, or is it just a general announcement in the paper or social media that this second reading will be taking place?
Just a general notice that is taking place.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we give a lot of attention to the few landlords that show up and voice concerns, but there's a lot of citizens who are too afraid to come and voice concerns because they're afraid of repercussions from their landlords. And I'm not saying that any of the people that hear, I'm sure they wouldn't do that, but there's a lot of people who don't have a voice because they're afraid, and I'm here to say that I think this is going to help those folks out. It's going to make sure they're living in quality housing. It's going to make sure that the city knows where they are. One of the best things I think that can happen out of this is the ability for our public safety personnel to be able to enter a building when there's an emergency in a timely manner instead of either having to break in or having to wait for a key holder. So I think that the benefits to the people who are actually paying for these rental units is going to be very noticeable in a very short amount of time for those folks. So I'm very supportive of both the rental code and the fee structure moving forward, and we'll make a motion to move the resolution to the committee or to the meeting on Tuesday night for the second reading.
Okay, Councilor Johnson makes a motion to move the rental code ordinance and fee schedule to the next council meeting for the second reading. Is there support? Is there support? Okay, supported by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Friedlieb.
Yeah, I'll preface my statements by, thanking the planning and zoning and Britt and anybody and everybody in the community that's been collaborating on putting this together, because it's been a long time coming. And I do in fact believe that something does need to be done, and we're in the process of doing that. Councilor Johnson has spoken informedly and experientially with regard to this and how it will be beneficial to many of the people in the community. I just have a sense in my gut, though, that we kind of overreacted to this. And that's just a gut feeling. It's not based on any data that I can even bring forth. But I just feel like we somewhat overreacted to that. And I base that on some of the comments that were brought forth by what I would call to be reasonable and responsible landlords in town that came to say that some of this is being put in place because there are people that are landlords that are not being particularly responsible towards the residents in their buildings. And maybe it should have been geared more towards them as opposed to everybody in town. And I also have some concerns with regard to the fees that people will be paying. I mean, these people are providing housing spaces for people in town and now being charged to do so on an annual basis, and upwards of $2,000 for, 101 units and up, but equally $250 for even one unit per year. It makes me wonder if, in fact, these costs that people are going to incur are public safety oriented or revenue oriented. And case in point, we've already discussed the fact that if we put this ordinance in place as we've documented it with the fee schedule that's attached, we're going to need to hire people in the community or in the city to oversee this and make these inspections on an annual basis. So I do have some concerns in regard to the cost burden that's going to definitely be passed down to the people that are renting from these landlords for sure, in addition to the costs that the city's going to incur with regard to having to hire additional personnel to oversee an ordinance of this comprehensive nature. So those are just my comments. I do agree that something does need to be put in place, but I also feel that in the interest of public safety, but also public safety has a lot to do with individual responsibility as well. And sometimes I think we're a little bit too heavy-handed in terms of government oversight that could in fact potentially cost people more than we realize in the long run. So those are my comments, but I do agree that something does need to be put in place, and I do appreciate very much and respect the time and effort that's been put in to this point in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freely. I have a couple comments that I'd like to share with everyone. The updated rental code ordinance itself, the language of the ordinance, the purpose of the ordinance is to provide an environment where whoever's renting is going to, the landlords have to be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of their particular property. They also are required to follow the Property Preservation and Maintenance Code that went into effect January 1st of 2017. They were subject to that as well. And so if we just had an ordinance without a fee schedule, would the landlords be opposed to that? The fee schedule is designed not to punish the landlord. The fine schedule is to make the landlords compliant with the request. And if they don't comply, they get fined for them not being in compliance. That makes sense to me as well. But when you're adding a fee schedule on, the fee schedule is to cover the costs associated with the inspection portion of the property itself. So fee schedule isn't for the landlord to pay. They're actually paying for their ability, or they're paying for someone outside their own construction company or whatever LLC they have, for somebody from the city, an outside entity, to come and inspect their property. So they're paying a fee to be inspected. That's the way they're looking at it. We look at it as a fact that we have to cover the costs associated with inspecting a property to ensure that it's a safe and healthy property for people to live in, and not rely on complaints from tenants who, as Councilor Johnson pointed out, some may be fearful of coming forward in an effort to get the landlord to fix a water faucet or leaky roof or something of that nature. So do they have the ability to contact our code official and report a condition of that's of concern or emergency for a danger for who they're renting from? Yes, they do. They still have that authority, and they have made those calls, and we have gone to inspect those through our code official. But the landlord does take and has in the past taken some kind of action against that tenant in order to, for the complaint that they made. And the example being on 8th Street South in the 300 block, there was a young woman that was living in an apartment, and there was a roof covered by a tarp because there was whole little roof was leaking. It was there all spring and almost all summer and never repaired and still leaked. She pleaded and pleaded and pleaded with the landlord to fix it. And the landlord did not do so. So then the code official, the residents, the young woman's grandfather calls me. I redirected him to Bill Cole in the code official's office. Bill Cole got it. Property Preservation Maintenance Code statute kicked in. They went over and inspected it, found that there was a leaky roof, and made a correction order to have them take some action within 10 days to make a plan to correct that order to ensure the safe living of that tenant. And the landlord fixed the roof within 10 days. So those kind of things happen. We already have that option. But that's on a case-by-case basis. This is an action by our city at ordinance and with our fee schedule to make sure that all properties are inspected to ensure compliance with the Property Preservation Code and to ensure that there's a safe environment for the tenants to live. And I think Councilor Freely points out, and I agree, that in some of these landlords, they don't need to have their place inspected because they have a clean environment that they provide for their personnel. And then, so they're kind of taking on a responsibility that they don't feel they need to because they are landlords that comply with the laws. And the small percentage that do not are what creates the problems in the city of Virginia and with other ordinances all over this state of Minnesota, Grand Rapids, Duluth, all of them, they have these ordinances in place for that very same reason. And so we could talk about a landlord who's responsible, who doesn't pay these fees. It's a cost of doing business. I think these landlords that were here earlier and the landlords that have contacted me and maybe have contacted the other councilors as elected officials as well are not really opposed to fee schedules, but they're opposed to how much it costs. And they were looking for an adjustment. I thought it was really too expensive in which to do so. So those are some of my thoughts and comments. I think overall, the ordinance is solid. The fee schedule, I still think is too high for inspection because the goal and objective is to inspect and make sure they comply. But what does it cost to us to send out an inspector? And those fees are designed to cover those costs. No matter how many we have to have it. I don't know how many we're going to have. We haven't really determined that yet. There's a sense and a recommendation that by our staff, we may have to hire additional inspectors. So you're going to have an inspector coming in, you have a code official, you have police, you have fire, whether it's a crime, whether it's a fire hazard, whether it's an electrical hazard, whether it's a construction hazard, whatever it is, there's going to be a combination, a group of our city staff that are going to be charged with going in and doing these inspections when they haven't had to before, taking away from some of their duties and responsibilities. And so the goal and objective of the fee is to recover those costs associated with inspection. But I get the landlord's concern about having to pay to have somebody come and inspect their own property. So, Brian, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. And thanks for rushing back over here. We're just talking about item 8, which is the rental code and the fee schedule. We've all had some comments that we were going to make, and I was rambling on and trying to delay it as long as I could until you got here. So I'm glad to see that you're here.
I apologize for being late.
No, thank you, Brian. So we're on item number 8. Did you have any comments about the rental code ordinance and the fee schedule as proposed?
Not as it relates to rental code. Obviously, I caught some of your comments at the end, and
Okay, thank you. Well, we have this Chief Mattson, Assistant Chief Nicola here in the audience. Would you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make with respect to this item? No? Okay, thank you.
Could I,
Yes, Councilor Freely.
You know, I don't know who brought it up, but was there some discussion about like, call it compliance incentives? Meaning like if we have these landlords that are maintaining their properties and all the boxes are checked and each year that's the case, could we lower their fee the following year, the following 3 years? I mean, wasn't that discussed? Like, that's what I'm saying. There are landlords that are maintaining their properties in top-notch condition. And so should they be paying the same amounts as those that aren't and are having many boxes checked that need to be improved upon? That's, you know, what kind of incentive can you give to those people that are actually being highly responsible and providing safe, secure housing for people in the community? Is that a possibility to add that in, some kind of an incentive for compliance?
Britt, would you have any comments about that?
Yep, so what planning and zoning recommended is they took out the inspection fee. There was an inspection fee on top of the license fee. That's been removed because they heard the public. And then what Grand Rapids did is once the ordinance goes into effect, if you sign up for your license within the first 6 months, the fee is waived. Doesn't mean your inspection's gonna happen because you're gonna get bombarded with license requests. We'll get to you when we get to you. And then once we do your first inspection, it's 3 years that you don't, if you fly with passive flying colors, no inspection for 3 years. So that would be one possibility, that maybe we waive it for those that come into compliance immediately.
I think that would give, you know, incentive for people to meet these standards and then have their costs reduced because they repeatedly and regularly and consistently have met those standards. That's one thing to do to kind of minimize the cost burden to those that are responsible landlords. So anyhow, thank you.
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. And just a very brief comment on the issue of benefit. The other thing that I can say from my perspective, and while this isn't a legal opinion on the proposed ordinance, from my perspective, there is a lot of value. I represent a number of landlords and HRAs, things like that. And I think one of the primary values, maybe unintended values, that landlords are going to see is a lot of time is spent in court if there's evictions or things like that, those types of proceedings. There's a lot of time spent arguing about what the condition of the property is, how things are going. And if you're in compliance and can show that you're in compliance with an ordinance like this, it's a great benefit in those types of litigations. And I think it's going to save a lot of resources and legal costs in having those fights.
And I think the small percentage of landlords that are not maintaining their properties, it's like the circle of defiance. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, for the lack of a better term that comes to mind, is that a landlord will say, well, if I have to pay these fees, then I'm just going to pass it on to my renter, number one. And number two, if I'm unable to pay those fees and I don't have that place rented because it's not in a good condition to rent, so I'm going to come to the county board. I'm going to say, look, I'm trying to rent this property. I'm trying to provide shelter for these people, but I'm unable to do so because I don't have the money in which to fix these things that's required by the city code because I have 15 properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to you and ask you to reduce my tax burden. And so they reduce the tax burden in order to cover the cost of the fees associated with them to rent the place, at the same time not providing, a safe and secure environment. So these landlords that aren't responsible aren't going to apply one way or the other. And there's a mechanism with the ordinance in which to fine them for that purpose. And that's the purpose of the ordinance. It's like I guess it's not like speeding down on the road on the Borgen Road where I'm doing 30 miles an hour and somebody else is doing 40 miles an hour and they get a citation for that and they pay a fine because they're using the road. And so that was the argument that was given to us. Well, why do I have to pay a fine if why is speed limit 30? Why is the speed limit 40? Why do I have to comply with that law? Why do I have to comply with this law? Why do I have to comply with that law? But for me personally, I agree with you, Gary. I think, Councilor Freely, it is an issue for the landlords that are responsible, but at the same time, if you look at the overall benefit to the community. And what we're trying to do is represent the entire community, the safety and security of rental housing in the city, whether it's market rate rental, or whether it's subsidized rental, whatever these landlords charge for their rent, they are going to pass the cost on to their renter in many respects. And that's what's going to happen regardless of what the fee schedule is going to be. So if putting an incentive in to those, and they don't have to be inspected for 3 years because they show they've complied, and as you indicated, Brian, the ordinance can give them a substantive argument that, they are providing good quality rental to the individuals who are trying to take them to court, and to show that they are being responsible. This ordinance helps them do so. I've read the ordinance in many other communities, particularly one in Grand Rapids, one in Duluth, which really isn't pertinent to what we're trying to do here because of the college environment down there. But overall, I'm supportive of both the ordinance and hesitantly will support the rental fee code that's in the ordinance, and with hopes that we might be able to find some incentives for those landlords who are responsible. So, anybody else? Okay, so is there a motion on the floor? Yes. Thank you. I guess I rambled quite a bit, so I apologize for that. So there's a rent to move. Is this a rental code or end the fee schedule forward to the next council meeting for the second reading? Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda, the item number 9, is review the proposed amendment to Chapter 10 of the City Code, adding Section 10.39 entitled tetrahydrocannabinol, THC products.
THC.
Very long word. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay. I reviewed the proposed amendment adding section 10.39. I think it's a solid ordinance. It's supported by staff. It's supported by our police department moving forward. So I'm comfortable in that regard. Just a couple of things that I've noticed that I'd like to see maybe changed. You have indicated and talked to Pam about this, and she kind of pointed that out to us. And I took a look at the amendment that maybe instead of having a fine schedule up to 3 years, or that licensing up to 3 years, we should move it up to 5 years, because it would match the liquor ordinance violation thing, so that if the fourth violation, you get shut down. Well, if this is only a 3-year license, you never get to that fourth violation. So I'd like to see that moved up to 5 years, number one. And then the second part of it is the ordinance does say 1,000 feet. We did get some information from one of the planning and zoning members, Mary McReynolds, that the intent was to not be 1,000 feet, was to change that to 500 feet. And by talking with our staff and the police chief and assistant chief of the police department, that this 500 feet will allow us to do some grandfathering or set some zoning requirements that those who are currently selling it, as long as they meet the requirements of the ordinance, would be eligible to continue to operate, provided they follow the rules and regulations and the 500-foot buffer. If it was at 1,000 feet, for example, Rocket Liquor was on downtown the Main Street, would be too close to the school, and they couldn't have these products. Granted that the liquor statute in the state of Minnesota doesn't allow liquor stores exclusively to sell these products, but there's a bill moving through the legislature to change that, to allow that to occur. So under 10.39, I think the 500 feet rule is reasonable and prudent.
Mayor, that 500 feet is actually in Chapter 11.
Am I?
Second ordinance, not the first one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I am way ahead of myself.
You are just jumped ahead, yeah, to the
Thanks
second
for
ordinance.
pointing that out to me.
These two ordinances go hand in hand, and I should mention that.
Then I'll
There is a
reserve-
Chapter 10, and then the Chapter 11 is the land use regulations modifying the zoning ordinance to
Oh,
allow
okay.
for the sales of these products.
So,
And that 500 feet you mentioned is in that sales portion of that. The violation that you had mentioned is in the Chapter 10, Chapter 11 is the actual zoning to allow sales.
so all the information that I've disseminated has nothing to do with item number 9.
But yes, but they do mirror each other. Those two do go together. Because once we
Okay.
create the license, we have to create the zoning that where they can sell.
Well, I won't repeat myself when we get to 10. How's that sound? All right, so any information or questions or comments by the council regarding the Chapter 10 of the City Code adding Section 10.39 titled tetrahydrocarbon on all products? Brian, did you have any comments or questions about that? Then we'll go to Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, by and large, this proposed legislation looks good to me. The one comment, or maybe for the sake of ease, the one thing I would suggest, or in my opinion, may warrant adding, is under Section E, which is ineligibility and basis for denial of a license 3. It says, "No license shall be granted or renewed for operation on any premises on which real estate taxes, assessments." I think we should add utilities to that list, just to keep it clear, because it does follow, or it says any, or other financial claims of the city, but I think to make utilities very clear, because I can see that would be one where we could end up with some arguments.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with mirroring the liquor license. I think that makes sense. And also supportive of adding the utilities in there. I'm not a law writer. Appreciate all the work that everybody's put into this. And just to move, I will move this portion of the ordinance, the 1039 forward. I'll move that forward for first reading.
Okay, Councilor Johnson moves item 9, the review, the proposed amendment to Chapter 10, City Code, adding Section 10.39 entitled tetrahydrocarbon on all products. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Freely. Further discussion. First, Councilor Freely, and then over to Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Freely.
Including from me, moving from 3 years to 5 years and the addition of the utilities aspect, correct? Thank you. And might I add, so like if you can't sell them at convenience stores, liquor stores, and gas stations, where will they sell them?
Shops,
Pardon?
tobacco shops.
Exclusive to a tobacco shop.
Well, that bears another question. First of all, we'll go to Pam and then over to Councilor Beyondich, because I have a question about liquor stores and now these places selling THC seltzers in. So in the which you're selling now at Super One. Pam?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one other addition under the penalties to also include the administrative penalty of $50. That is also in our liquor license.
I will amend my motion accordingly.
It's item number 2, IV, and then A, it needs to refer to the section of the $50. So we need to add that. It's in there, it's just not, the fee's not, so it needs to revert back to the fee. Yes. So we don't need a motion for that one, Steve. Thank you, though.
Oh, okay, okay, all right, thank you, thank you. So, Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. I know when this first came to our attention, we put a 1-year moratorium. So when did that expire, or has it expired?
It
That
has
we're
not
discuss-
yet. No. We're still in that up to 1 year moratorium is what we did.
So this was brought forward before the 1 year?
Up to 1 year moratorium. It was not intended to be a fully 1 year. It was meant to be, give us time. The way the statute reads, we have to use the moratorium as time for us to figure out our ordinances.
Could I ask our police chief, Nicole Mattson, to come up and speak on this?
Sure, thank you. Chief Mattson and Assistant Chief Nicola, would you please come forward? And I believe we have some questions for you. Thank you.
We were going to bring samples and examples to make this meeting a little more interesting, but
You got a bag of
we thought
gummies
that
in
might
there
be
then?
frowned on a little bit.
You
Mayor.
got the gummies in there or whatever? Okay, Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And as I've talked to the general public about this issue, there is so much confusion when I ask about the difference between CBD and THC. People are not really sure of what that is. And we have such our population in town is, I'll include myself in that, an aging population. Could you explain the differences and how the two products affect people?
I will do it in
layman's terms here, I am not a medical expert, but CDB and THC, the difference between them, CDB stands for cannabinol. THC is, as Britt said, I can try to say it, tetrahydrocannabinoids, which of the two substances, those are located in your marijuana plant. CDB is sold generally as an oil or a topical and is not psychoactive. That is where the big difference is. Your THC is the psychoactive chemical in your marijuana plant, which is a Schedule I narcotic federally.
However,
Yes, however, and I don't want to get into that, but obviously the states with your cannabinoids, which is your CDB, and your edible THC items, which do contain the psychoactive. The difference between, and you are a plant grower and you have, or you go to get your edibles. The state has now regulated at a certain dosaging, these THC levels in an edible product that are allowed in the state of Minnesota to be sold. Plant-wise can be stronger than obviously the difference there. And that's a whole different ballgame with the new legislation of the marijuana coming through here upcoming. But the edibles are regulated, the THC with the psychoactive chemical in them, with the dosaging, packaging regulations, age, licensing. That is where you guys with the moratorium have the time to be more restrictive than what the state has put out for, licensing purposes, the zoning, where the items are contained behind the counter, where they're sold. And obviously, yes, as the mayor said, the liquor stores, that's a whole other ballgame because they are regulated under Minnesota state law that they cannot sell any of those products currently in a liquor store.
May I just clarify for a moment? So the sale of these THC seltzers,
As long as the dosaging is under the state guidelines, they can absolutely be sold.
they can?
Except, yes, in the liquor, not in a
Not in the
liquor
liquor
store.
store, correct. So it's like Super One and those kind of things. So when we're looking at the regulation regarding the utilization of this and the zoning of it, and with the 500 feet buffer, there may be some places, I don't know if there are in town, that would not meet that requirement. They couldn't sell the THC seltzers because they're within 500 feet of a school. Or I don't think that applies to Super One, as I say, for example, they have Super One North and South. I think by making that adjustment of 500 feet, they would be in compliance. They would be they'd be outside of 500 feet from the Laurentian school.
It's gonna be close on Super One North.
It'll be close?
On Forest Street, I would have to say. Like I said, I'm
Yeah, so, okay, all right, so that's.
Parkview there, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Please continue, Counselor Beyondich, thank you.
Thank you. So when you talk about THC and the effects of THC, how does, and I'm not sure, I'm maybe opening a can of worms here, but for government employees, are they tested?
You have a couple mandates there through the city, and Britt, if I'm misinforming here, all of our employees that have commercial driver's license are mandated they cannot have any form of THC in their system. Law enforcement, federal mandate, we are the same way. We cannot have any level of THC in our system.
Fire has that same regulation.
Fire
as
has
law
the same.
enforcement. Yep.
And we are a drug-free work zone area, which there are federal and state guidelines, and with our new drug and alcohol testing reasonable suspicious policy that we have, that is where your testing comes in. If there is impairment that can be articulated during the work hour, a supervisor, or if another employee gets a hold of a supervisor and says, hey, I'm noticing this smell, this odor, this behavior, this struggle, then yes, with the reasonable suspicion, we are able to test.
And then that's only in the workplace.
Correct.
How long does it stay in the system, in your system?
That varies. Hair follicles, it's 30-plus days.
but individuals' bodies, it's all
Bodies,
different.
yeah.
It's different for everybody, but quite a while typically.
Got a larger shelf life than some of, yes, the other controlled substances.
And or isn't the purpose of the levels that are mandated by, or that are approved by state law to negate that from being in your system for that period of time, or is that not accurate?
That can vary too, because I know the dosaging units and some of the items that are present for sale around our state, in chatting with the AGE Committee, which is the Alcohol Gambling and Enforcement, they have come across, yes, illegal amounts, higher amounts that are coming from Colorado, Utah, where they are not within that 5 milligram, 3 milligram dosaging units that the state has mandated.
And that comes to the packaging of the edibles and the gummies and the mislabeling of the packages as well?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing that was brought to my attention is the loss of tax revenue to the city on these items. Are we able to capture tax revenue from the sale of this product?
Not currently. Under Minnesota legislation, no. Cities are not able to. Through licensing is about the only way. However, they also, in the instructions that are given when you are looking to do a city ordinance, you can set a licensing fee, but it cannot be too excessive, I guess, if I'm using the right word.
So no sales tax would generate to the city from the sale of this in Virginia?
Not off of your edibles currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that bodes a question to you, Brian, about the enforcement aspect of THC. So say, for the sake of argument, the state of Minnesota passes the personal use of marijuana, okay? And so by law, through the states, you're allowed to buy a certain amount. And so who would have the enforcement authority over those commercial manufacturers that sell more than what's the law requires? Who is the enforcement arm? Is that the state of Minnesota? Is that the alcohol gambling and enforcement entity? I don't believe that, and maybe you can answer that, Chief. Do you have any enforcement authority over the, or?
We have been instructed through the alcohol, gaming, and enforcement. We have a couple of forms. If we find or note that they are selling when they are not supposed to currently, which the police department personnel has been paying attention to our locations in town and have documented what we have observed and noticed. Any dosaging, packaging violations, selling, obviously we will be doing, compliance checks here, but we are to report it to the AGE Committee at this point, as, like I said, they cannot definitively test for the product right now for the dosaging units, what are in it, the labs that we have available to law enforcement, the forensic, until that piece is in place. And the other issue is obviously on the driving, the intoxication side. They have not set a level like they have with alcohol, where they are going to consider a person impaired underneath with THC aboard. And the other issue, from what I've understood, Chad, if I'm not, CDB still has the cannabinoids in it, and THC has a tetra. The test currently available right now for consumption cannot decipher the two. So the state has to come up with a different testing procedure on that as well, because if you take either product orally, you will 9 times out of 10 pop positive for a THC test.
I think most of us are convinced that if THC was like alcohol and there was a scientific way to say blow on this and we can tell how much you have in your system, marijuana probably would have been legalized federally long ago. But it is a problem, and make no mistake, somebody goes down and takes edibles, that is something that is going to make them high to a certain respect. Whether you take what the dosage says and, you get a small buzz from it, or you take several of those out of the package. So it is a concern, but obviously, since we have a state law, This is just something that we need to tackle. And I know, like Britt pointed out, that the moratorium is up to a year. And by all means, we understand we're pushing this ordinance forward. And by all means, I think we would like to see at least a little bit of time here because we do want to see specifically on compliance checks, where are we at right now? Because we know that locally we're not supposed to be selling this, but they are. So there's another thing for me personally is if we have local shops that are already not following what we as a city said our ordinance should be, which is a current moratorium, well, you know what? Maybe their licensure, when it does come time for them to apply for it, should be held up for a while because they weren't following what you as a council decided was going to be put in place. So, but I think that's something that over the next couple of months, we can figure out exactly what's going on and also make it an educational piece for these tobacco shops as what do they currently have in stock, what is not legal according to the law, and what is legal that they currently have in stock.
And so for you, and I have one question for you, one question for Brian, and then over to Councilor Johnson. The question I have is that when a patrol officer is making their rounds and they follow a vehicle, and you know somebody could drink a 12-pack of seltzer, or they could eat 4 packages of gummy bears, and could technically be impaired. But it would be the reasonable suspicion, the driving habits, and things that are out of the norm that would give you reasonable suspicion to stop, and then probable cause to investigate further. So you have that authority. But in order to arrest somebody for being under the influence, it's the testing aspect that makes it challenging for all of you as well. And so my question to Brian is that when it comes time for us to take action on actually in acting an ordinance that's currently being before us today, are we required by law, or is this case law that said that we have to find a way in which to allow, if legal, these retail stores to sell? So we can't just say, or can we just say we're not going to issue any licenses in the city of Virginia? But I think don't we have to give them an opportunity or find a place in zoning to give them that opportunity without discriminating? How does that work?
So my understanding, thank you, Mayor, my understanding of the current legislation is that there is no restriction on the city putting in place further controls that are more restrictive than the state law is. But I do know that there were some variations or proposals in the new legislation that's running through down in St. Paul that would limit or take away a city's ability to put those controls in place. And if I may go just a little bit further, maybe to comment on something that our chief and assistant chief indicated. From a prosecution standpoint, these the marijuana DWIs are going to be nightmares unless and until they develop some better testing. And it's going to drive the price of prosecution up because each of those, we've had laws in place in Minnesota forever that address the situation. It would be under the standard driving while impaired. But the difficult part is you've got to go into court and prove to a jury of 6 or more persons that this person's ability to drive a motor vehicle is impaired by the substance. And you're going to have every defense attorney in the area is going to say, well, maybe that's just how they usually are, or how do we know they were impaired on the substance? And it becomes a nightmare because, while it's obvious to us on the ground, when we, as law enforcement officers, it's fairly clear, from my understanding at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can tell when somebody's impaired, but it's a much different thing to go and convince jurors months after the fact that that condition existed. And sometimes the videos that we take and the testimony doesn't do justice to what you really see on the street.
Then it gets reduced to a misdemeanor traffic citation or something on a plea bargain, or then maybe the citation is just made because you don't have the ability to do it. So thank you for that. Councilor Johnson, thank you for patiently waiting.
Thank you. My question is about the sheet that Britt handed out today talks about we can limit the number. Is that discussion for 10 or is that a discussion for 11?
For 10.
For 10. So that's one thing I think I would like to see us do is figure out how many current stores are there and are we going to allow for expansion? It's the sheet Britt turned in or passed out this morning Fourth from the bottom of the list, limit the number of establishments within the city. And right now, we know of 3 legitimate tobacco shops that could sell that. So maybe that's one of our ways of moving forward, as we move this forward, is we set a license limit. We have license limits for alcohol, which we have lots of and we hold very tight to. Maybe that's something that we should be thinking about here, is maybe we go to 5 and we're done, or I don't know what that number is based on. Because right now, all of those establishments are within the Chestnut Street area, and there might be a possibility that someone wants to open something up along the highway or something. So that's where I'd like to see for that limitation is a number of licenses in town, because we can always adjust that in the future if we need to. That's something the council can change as we need. So that would be my input on 10 here, about let's set a number that we can utilize, and then someone would have to come to us with extenuating circumstances why they would need to have a 6th tobacco store somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Any more questions about, on item number 9? I think we're going to the direction of maybe this doesn't go to the council yet. Maybe there's a lot more vetting that has to be done here. But I think by recommendation, by the information we've been provided today, that this ordinance needs to be more vetting. Councilor Friedlieb.
I guess I thought if there was going to be any benefit to this, it would be from the tax revenues, but I guess I'm confused as to why we would not be able to acquire the 1% sales tax on items such as this being sold in this city. I don't understand that.
Britt?
We do not collect sales tax on tobacco. That's not a sales tax, that's tobacco tax. It's a different tax than sales tax. And this follows the same language.
And then just for the sake of conversation, I mean, like when, like the psychoactive actions on the body with regard to THC, my understanding is limited to only hours. So like if you pulled someone's hair to analyze that, 30 days later, you could say that they use THC, but they're not even remotely under the influence of said drugs.
Exactly the
correct?
problem we run into with
Right,
DWI.
so that's what's gonna be difficult. And they're currently working on something that's gonna give you more of an immediate effect to be able to acknowledge that, like a blow test of some sort, or?
We are hoping so, that somebody is working on something.
Yeah, that would be beneficial for every community.
If it was me, I'd probably make a lot of money off it.
All right, thank you.
I think my personal opinion only, I think the state of Minnesota should repeal that law until we get everything in order, but they're moving forward with, they would only pass that in the Farm Bill. They also allow that to going on now. The personal use marijuana bill is flying through the legislature, and we still are lagging behind in finding a way in which to measure, the amount in someone's system to make safe streets and highways. So I just think this needs more vetting than bringing it forward to pass this ordinance on the second reading. I would like to see this held in abeyance until we can figure out some of these things, and I think that was the purpose, a wise decision we made as a council to put a moratorium until we can get this right. Councilor Friedlieb.
Yeah, and I would suggest legislatively, I mean, my understanding, I have a sister who lives in Colorado. The Colorado public education system has benefited significantly by millions of dollars in tax revenue. Similarly to the lottery tickets that are sold in this state for the Department of Natural Resources and so on. I don't know, I think that should be considered in this state. If they're gonna enact this kind of law to allow people to do this, then we should be benefiting accordingly, I think.
And that has been part of the discussion. There hasn't been a bill introduced, it hasn't gone through conference, but it has been part of the discussion about the taxes and the fees raising on a variety of products, including tobacco. And part of that, to raise those tobacco, they have to look at the orders and change the way the law reads in order to accomplish that goal objective. There has been some discussion on the Senate side to talk about, wait a minute, let's talk about what you just said here. Maybe there should be some legislative action about how, and it has to go through the tax committee and all those kind of things. And none of that has happened this year. Thank you. So are we taking any action here? We're just reviewing it.
We can just review, we have some changes to make, and we'll bring it back for additional discussion going forward.
We do have a motion and second to move it forward.
I will withdraw my motion as there's additional discussion.
Okay, Councilor Johnson withdraws his motion to move this forward. Does the second of the amendment also rescind? He does. Thank you. So there is no motion on the floor. No other more discussion related to item number 9 on the agenda. Let's move to item 10. Britt?
Item number 10 is the actual zoning, where currently our zoning code does not allow for these types of sales, and so we have been following along with the League of Minnesota Cities, which suggests that we should not only look at sales, we should look at distribution and manufacturers. So in this ordinance, they address that if for sales of medical cannabis distribution or sales, B1 and B2 would be conditional for a distribution facility, which means they'd have to apply for a conditional use permit, and then there would be a public hearing. And then for cannabinoid product sales, it'd be permitted in all business districts. So that means any residential district would not be allowed to have cannabinoid sales. You'd have to be in a business district only.
Very good.
And then right behind that is the medical cannabis laboratory could also be allowed in an industrial district. So those that are creating the medical cannabis to be distributed through medical pharmacies.
And I think this is another one of those parts of the of Chapter 11 under zoning that we would meld into the discussion of the other two items too before we make a decision on where
Correct. They really do go together.
we zone.
Yeah, they really do go together. And one thing I do want to point out is the location on property for medical cannabis distribution facilities does state it can't be any closer than 200 feet of a residential. So those, it's known, we only have a few facilities in Minnesota, but it's known they are very smelly. This ordinance does require them to have protocols in place to alleviate the smell, and it cannot be near any residential
Can I
facilities.
add something to that?
Yeah, please do.
I was on my way back from the cities last weekend, and as we were just coming the north part, you hit a spot where you could smell, I mean, it was and I was like, wow. When I got home, sure enough, went on Google Earth and checked out and that's exactly what it was one of these spots. And I mean, and it was strong. And I know if I lived in that area, I would not be a happy camper, that's for sure. So definitely something to try to avoid when it comes to figuring out where some of these facilities, if they ever did come our way, went. Now, I know like downtown Hibbing has Leaf Line, and I haven't heard a whole lot of complaints necessarily, but they aren't the ones manufacturing per se the products, they're distributing them, so a little bit different there.
And I can attest to that in San Diego last year, where this strong smell was coming from, and the Marine that married my niece says, "Oh, that's a marijuana manufacturing plant." He goes, "You want to take a ride by there?" I said, "No, not really." He says, "You really want to go there? Look at all the, you think this was a tourist attraction, and you go in, there's hundreds of cars parked along trying to get a little whiff." So, yeah, so thank you for that. Okay.
Where you pointed out earlier, Mayor, that's also where the retail establishment selling the cannabinoid products must be located, and the planning and zoning is suggesting 500 feet, not the 1,000.
Yeah, which is, so, okay. Yeah, we can take a look and make that change and then continue to discuss all these together. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor. And I had asked the question about why it says religious, charitable, and educational use land. I know that back in the day, we used to limit alcohol sales to Main Street because that's where the police department was, and we've changed that because of the changing nature. So my question is, why charitable? What are we trying? I would prefer that our ordinance say where it can be, and leave it at that as opposed to excluding, because it becomes very specific if it's a 200 or 500 feet perimeter, which exact corner, and I know it says the closest corner to the, and that can be, I want us to be very clear that we outline the business, if it's the business district, exactly where that is as we move forward, so it's very clear when we get to the point of, if we're in litigation, there's no measuring if someone's ruler is longer or shorter than somebody else's ruler, because I can see that happening. So if we defined, like we had done, and maybe this will change in years, but like we had done for the alcohol, maybe if we do that moving forward, along with the number of the licenses in the previous in 10, that'll really help us contain where the selling can be, because all those other rules seem to be, the foot perimeter just seems to be kind of arbitrary because they're not going to sell to kids anyway. It doesn't matter if they're right next door to the school. Theoretically, they're not selling. What we're doing is we're protecting the children from being tempted to try. And I understand that, but I think as we've learned here, doing negative motions becomes very confusing. So if we can be proactive and say, yes, you can have these 3 blocks and these 3 blocks in this area, I think will help us in the future for clarity. So that's what I'd like to see is more definition of where, not, and then leaving in no residential. Like that to me is very clear with our zoning stuff. So that would be my input on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilors. I just have one more question before we move on to the last item on the agenda. And can the city enact part of this ordinance, if we can't collect taxes from this? Can you require any retailer that sells these products to donate 60% of their revenue to a designated charity? We can't do that, can we? All right, thank you.
Young Teddy could always use some funds.
Well, I threw it out there.
And Mayor, I do want to point out one more caveat that I just now see in the packet here. The medical cannabis distribution facility, which are those that distribute like the Leaf Line and Hibbing, they, by state statute, cannot be within 1,000 feet of a school at all, ever. So that's not going to change, but we can change the product sales, but we can't change the medical distribution facility.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, Councilor Johnson.
And I would say those are 2 very different groups
Very
of
different
folks
types
that
of
are coming in.
buildings,
To get medical marijuana in Minnesota, you have to pay licensing fee yourself, and you have to pay for, it's expensive to hold a medical marijuana card in Minnesota. So those folks already know what they're doing, and a lot of them are already traveling to places where they can buy it already. So there are 2 different groups of folks that this would be affecting.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Okay, anything else? Looks like we have some more work to do here, which we will be doing. We have a little more time in which to accomplish that goal and objective. So unlike other cities, we are going to make sure we cross all our Ts, dot our Is, and do what's in the best interest of our community. So anything else on item number 10? Okay, seeing none, anything more to add, Chief, Assistant Chief? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Next item.
Thank you. The final item on the agenda today is a closed meeting to discuss potential litigation as per Minnesota Statute 13D05 Subdivision 2.
Okay, looking for a motion to close.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Freelieb, supported by Councilor Johnson. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have a closed session.